welcome the CCAC members for dialing in today. Generally the membership meets the second Tuesday of the month and a different member hosts our meeting. So we reverted to these Zoom meetings and we're just thrilled to have both of you here today. Just to provide some organizational updates, CCAC started the webinar series Pandemic Programming, Insights and Information for Today and What's Next back in March or April. And as of June 1st, so as of last week, we have rebranded and we are going to continue the webinars because of the great success that we've had, but they're now being called Disruption, Driving Innovation, and Embracing Economic Change. And that happens to be the tagline that was selected last year, the end of last year, in partnership with the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. As many of you know, the other side of the house, the Alliance for Regional Development, we each year host a summit on regional competitiveness with and at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. So this year, that conference is scheduled for November 16th. And what we've decided to do is use the tagline for that conference, rebrand our webinar series, and continue to offer webinars between now and November leading up to the big summit. So if there are any particular topics or speakers that you would like to see or recommend as members, please be sure to get in touch with me. I also want to make the membership aware that the regional, the effort that we were doing in the corridors, the Corridor Revitalization Initiative, if you recall, we ended phase 1 on February 11th, and we are continuing to advance some of the objectives that were outlined in the 5-team reports. Specifically right now, we're continuing to work on the Austin Garden. If you recall, we were going to do a day of service on Earth Day back in April, but we are in the process of working to make that happen as we continue to advance and allow people to congregate. And then last but not least, CCAC is working in partnership with the Chicago Department of Planning and Development on an effort that they have underway regarding 3 neighborhoods within Invest Southwest. So be assured that there is still a lot of opportunity for our CCAC members to be active while we are experiencing COVID and transitioning into this phase 3. Which leads me directly to our speakers today. And we're just absolutely thrilled to have both Sam Skinner and Michael. And Michael, forgive me if I say your name incorrectly, but is it Fassnacht?
That is correct. Well done.
Excellent, terrific. Well, and for our audience, Sam Skinner, you may recall, is the former Secretary of Transportation and Chief of Staff in the George H.W. Bush administration. I'm very proud member of that administration, and I was there at the same time, so it's so wonderful to be able to cross paths again. And we're very lucky that Sam agreed not only to speak today, but also to help Mayor Lightfoot lead this recovery task force. And Michael is the Chief Marketing Officer for the city. Michael's credentials are extremely impressive. And in fact, he has been involved with rebranding of the public library. He worked on leading the branding for the city's Amazon HQ2 pitch. If you're seeing commercials on TV regarding the census 2020, we have Michael to thank for that. And he has a very, again, distinguished career in the private sector as well. So gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Is there anything about your backgrounds that I have failed to highlight and you want the audience to be aware of?
No, I'm glad you said it was Mayor Lightfoot instead of Governor Lightfoot. That would create some interesting issues for us.
Well,
Mayor Lightfoot is fully involved in the city of Chicago, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So and Michael and I are delighted to be working with her in this very important effort. And it's began several months ago as part of Michael was working with the mayor before the virus about marketing the city and what we could do. And then, of course, it was logical when the virus occurred and all the things that occurred as a result of it, that Mike would basically, he would change his task and we would establish the Recovery Task Force. And the Recovery Task Force consists of the co-chairs are Mayor Lightfoot and myself, her staff and others are staffing this task force. Some very talented people from a lot of cross sections of law firms and, more importantly, consulting firms and others, getting a lot of input from a lot of people, including your organization. Congratulations on that. You're well ahead of us on many of these issues, as well as a number of people in the region and everybody else. And our mission is not to get the city open. It's once the city is open and we go through the various phases, what can we do together collectively with the business community, as well as the non-profits, the NGOs, and of course the city and the city agencies and the state and all of the regional locations as well, because this is a regional task force. Because in Chicago, many of the people that work in Chicago live in the suburban area, and many of the people in Chicago, there's also people in the suburban area that work in Chicago. So we have really a need here that's regional. And we've had a number of conversations with a number of leaders in the region about what their suggestions are as what we do once we come back online. And of course, our mission has changed a little bit. It really hasn't changed, but it may change our emphasis as a result of what happened last week and this week in Chicago, the demonstrations. And it's important for us to make sure that we concentrate on this issue that's brought up in those demonstrations. It turns out that's one of Mayor Lightfoot's platform issues, and she's very involved anyway, and she feels very strongly about the very issues that we talked about and we're talking about in the last week. So our report and our efforts will be taking into consideration those issues as well. And I just want to make a comment on Mayor Lightfoot's qualifications. One of the issues that she's obviously taken on is police reform. And that issue is something that she's very familiar with. She's been involved for a long time on this issue. There's probably not a more qualified mayor to deal with those issues as we go forward for the city of Chicago. And as you know, in her address last week, she took some very dramatic actions, and she's obviously got a new police commissioner that she'll be working with. And she's got some very solid ideas, and she's already working on that. So we're not going to really basically talk about justice reform. That might be a separate subject that you might want to discuss, but we want to talk about the economic impact on the city of Chicago, the emotional impact on the city of Chicago that the virus has had, and more importantly, our program and what we're doing to develop programs to deal with those as we go forward. Our timetable is to get a preliminary report out the middle of June. Michael has been leading this effort along with Katie Leone from the mayor's office. I can tell you firsthand, having worked with a lot of people for a long number of years in the public sector, the mayor has put a first-rate team on this, and they're doing an excellent job. And Michael, I'll ask him to talk a little bit about the number of people we've talked to and the input that we've gotten. The mission is obviously, number one, how do we get people back to work? Because that is the economic engine that drives everything. So number one, how do we get people back to work safely? Number two, how do we help them when they come back to be comfortable coming back? And that's the whole emotional issue, the mental issues. And also tied into that is what role do the non-for-profits and the organizations that have done so much for the city of Chicago, what role can they play? And how do we make sure that they're fully involved and they're fully funded and they're fully able to handle the issues that are going to result from a health and mental state for the citizens of Chicago? And that's a very important issue to the mayor. We also want to make sure that when the economy comes back, the city is doing everything it can to support them. We don't want to be the obstacle to getting back online and getting these businesses back online. And if that means financial support, especially to smaller businesses that couldn't draw down on the federal stimulus or it didn't do enough, we want to make sure that we know who they are and that we're identifying them and helping them as well as much as we can. And that's an important part of it. And then I'd say the final part of it is the whole issue of how do we make people comfortable that Chicago is back? You know, Chicago has some great things. We've done a study. We've broken it up into 5 groups, and I won't bother you with it. This one is the change study, and basically is the change. How do we change as a result of this? Then we had a marketing and business development team of co-chairs that worked on that, and that's basically what we were doing before, only it's obviously amplified. We've got a team that's working on mental and emotional health, which is very important. We got to deliver that into the community. Got a group that's working on economic stimulus and what we can do at the federal or state level or local level to stimulate the economy. And then equally important is regional coordination. We want to make sure that we don't duplicate everything that's going on. We know everything that's going on with the various organizations like yours, Kelly, and others, and we take advantage of that. I will just want to share with you one thing that we have a lot going on for us in Chicago, and I don't think we should minimize that. But I'm just going to remind us before we get into the details. These are some of the things that we found out, which we know, but it's important. We have a large diversified population as compared to the other metropolitan areas in the country. We have the 3rd largest population in the U.S. with highly racial diversity. We're a very diverse city. We're the most diverse city in the economy in the United States, in the city of Chicago, number 1. We have the 3rd greatest GDP in the U.S. for cities. We have we're in 2nd place with the most Fortune 500 headquarters in the U.S. We're 2nd. So all of that is good. We've got people that understand Chicago and are involved. We've got the 7th best urban transportation system in the world. Now, those of you that travel know, you know, what excellent systems there exist all over. We have the 7th best in the world. We have the 6th greatest airport by passenger volume in the world. We used to be number 1, but we're still very high in that, and 2nd in the United States. And this one I thought was very interesting. We have the highest proportion of college graduates among the 7 largest cities in the country. All of that is the backbone that I think is going to make the recovery move ahead on a quick basis, and we're going to draw on those resources to do so. The challenges, I don't have to tell you all of them that they have. They're immense. I don't want to prioritize one versus another. They're all very important. The one that I do highlight, though, is people are afraid. They were afraid before last week, and they're afraid now. And we've got to make it comfortable, make sure they're comfortable coming back. And when they come back, that the buildings that they're going into and the companies that they're working for have got the tools to protect their employees as they return to the workforce. And we're doing that. A lot of the time we've spent the last several weeks, the task force has spent, but her task force has been on exactly that, understanding the virus, understanding the implications, understanding that a lot of people want to know we don't yet have a vaccine and may not have one for a while. So what can we do as far as protocol to make sure that people are as safe as they can be? And I can tell you that a lot of your organizations are on the line. The buildings and the businesses in Chicago have been wonderful. They really get it. If you go into a business today, whether it be small or large, they've got masks, they've got cleansing for your hands, they've got distancing. You go in an elevator, we've got distancing. The buildings in Chicago, the workplaces in Chicago and the region have really picked up on that. And as they return to work, they're following the rules. That doesn't mean everybody's following the rules, but if the corporations in America and the business in the United States and the businesses in Chicago follow the rules, that's going to set the standard for everybody else. And as you know, Mayor Lightfoot's not shy about reminding people if you're not following the rules. And we have to applaud her for that, but she can't do that forever. That's everybody's responsibility. And as simple as I went into McDonald's this morning and some person didn't have a mask. So I said to myself, how do I handle that? Well, I went to my car, came back, gave him a mask. It didn't say a word and left. I didn't want to embarrass him in front of his friends unnecessarily, but we can each do our own little thing. I'm running out of masks in some parts of the state, but I can tell you in Chicago, we've got a lot of masks and a lot of people are using them, and we're going to continue to do so. So I think Kelly sent you a list of our co-chairs. If not, she will send you a list of the co-chairs of our committee, and they are working very hard, very talented people. Michael, do you have anything you want to add before we get into some questions?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. It's very eloquently, I think, described our recovery task force. Maybe a few adds. I think some other cities as well have a recovery task force, and I would like to see how we're different. I think our task force has two big differences, and Sam mentioned some of them. First, the change study. We really want to have a pause first to understand what really has changed and what have we do now differently. I saw some other cities immediately try to find solutions without understanding. I think sometimes we have to be more humble in this crazy, fast-paced time to really take a breath, like what has changed? I think the change study has shown three things, not necessarily surprising. First, the pre-existing inequalities have been further amplified through COVID-19. We all know that the brown and black community has been hit harder than any other community, as well socioeconomically. The further people who are as well had tougher times before have even now a more challenging time to come back. Second, as we all know, some industries have been hit much harder. I'm involved with the tourist sector and conventions, and we really have to rethink how do we attract tourism, how do we rethink conventions. So I think a lot of industries cannot expect to be back to normal. It will be a new normal, and we have to proactively think about that. And third, a lot of research has shown all the benefits of cities that cities in North America have grown the last 20 years are suddenly put in questions. How can you still have an urban, creative, active center when people are kind of asked to be separate? So we have some initial ideas about how to address that, but we first have to be also really honest on some of the challenges and understand them strategically so we can adapt to that. Like Sam said, I think in the middle of it, clearly the killing of George Floyd, we were forced to pause and thinking about how we're addressing that. And we all, as I was a corporate leader in the private sector for a long, long time, and we all have to think what we have to do differently to make sure we're addressing that existing system inequality. I mean, I'm honored to work with Sam and so many other talented people on behalf of the mayor. And I would love to answer questions or, they know nothing taboo. Sam and I are always very frank and direct. So it has been quite an adventure.
Well, thank you, Michael. And one thing I want to be sure that both you and Sam are aware of, one of our CCAC members, the Smith Group, last week we did a webinar based on a document that they are widely distributing, and it's a holistic approach to returning to work. And it's the webinar was very informative. I've received a lot of great feedback from our stakeholders. I'm happy to share that document with you, as well as the link to our discussion. But it really helps both employees and employers understand some of the dynamics that should be put in place to make people comfortable and to rearrange the office if that's necessary to get that 6 feet distance. So hopefully that can be a resource for your task force. And what I'd like to do is we have a handful of CCAC board members that would like to join this discussion. So I'm going to start adding them on. While I do that, Michael, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the others that are on the task force, who's leading which committees, who's all involved. And then we'll get the board members on, and we will be opening it up to the audience for questions. So please see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and feel free to submit a question. And after we go through a quick introduction with some of the members of the CCAC board, we'll make sure we address all of our audience questions. So Michael, do you want to chat a little bit about who is involved with the task force?
I mean, there's a lot of people, which is a great thing. We try very inclusive. In totality, we have over 200 members from almost all industries representative. If you look at the market and business development team, we also have people who partly live in Chicago, but also have an outside perspective, like Richard Edelman, who runs the largest privately held public relations firm, who's an amazing leader in that space and helps us. We have Melody Hobson on the policy and economic stimuli task force, who lives partly on the West Coast, but also in Chicago, brings a great perspective to that. And then Alexa James, who's kind of the key lead on the mental and emotional health group, who's here in Chicago. So we have a really very diverse group of folks who really bring very different perspectives in. And then we have always in each of these committees, we have between 30 and 50 members. And we every week meet, we discuss things. We already right now in the recommendation phase, we score this recommendation based on criteria we agreed on. And now we kind of have like a regrouping phase based on the events of the last 10 days to really make sure that almost like a matrix, how difficult it is to implement some of our recommendations and what is the impact level of that recommendation. So we can make sure we do address some of the tougher long-term issues, but we also have some quick wins that we can focus short-term. For example, we know that the film industry has not been able to produce any videos, any movies, any shows over the last 4 months. That we expect there will be significant demand for production spaces. So we're putting a very proactive approach together to go to all the big production studios to say, Chicago is ready now if you want to produce a 3 or 5 year show in a great place with the right location, with the right talent, and with the right incentives. So it's a nice combination of short-term but also longer-term tougher issues that are really driven by the diversity in this task force.
Thank you. So I'd like to introduce you to our CCAC board chairman, Greg Hummel. Greg, do you want to say hi?
Hi there. Thank you so much for your leadership in this critical time. We will have some specific questions, but I'll just start by saying thank you for stepping up as you both have.
Well, you're welcome. Actually, it's bittersweet because it's exciting as someone that's been in Chicago and started in 1960 with IBM in June of 1960. Chicago is my home. Chicago is where I've worked and been most of my life. So it's something everybody wants to do, and I'm overwhelmed by the outburst of support that's come from the community in part of this effort. It's just everybody wants to pitch in, and that's Chicago way. So it's I wouldn't say it's fun, it's challenging, but it's rewarding. Thank you.
I'd also like to introduce Andrew Broderick, who is the president of the Burnham Council, which is the young leader tier of CCAC. Andrew?
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks. Nice to be in front of you all here too, and I'm looking forward to having a discussion. Got a couple questions for you.
Great. We'll get right to those. Steve Galler. Steve, want to say hi?
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your work on the task force and being with us today.
Excellent. Suzette.
Good afternoon. I'd like to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, my fellow members of the CCAC board. Thank you both for your leadership and your service on the task force.
And Don Resnick? Don, are you on the line? I see you're muted.
I'm video challenged right now, but I do want to again welcome you and thank you very much. I grew up in the city and I've lived or worked in the city all my life, and I recognize all the challenges that you have, and hopefully we are very hopeful that the Chicago Central Area Committee can play a part and can be of help in this process.
Thank you, Don. And if there's any other board members that I missed, I apologize, but I know that these 5 confirmed, and I sent bios to Michael and Sam in preparation for today's discussion. Andrew, you mentioned you have a few questions, so why don't we begin with you?
Sure, yeah, I have a question about how the task force is either aligning with or coordinating with the City of Chicago's Invest Southwest initiative, and how resources are being deployed and coordinated to help improve and strengthen the South and West Side neighborhoods that are part of that effort.
Well, first of all, the team that is working on the efforts that were already underway is integrated totally into the Recovery Task Force. This is a task force that's established by the mayor of the city of Chicago. She has taken her key people and put them on this staff. These are people that were working on the other areas. There's nothing more important than some of the efforts that we've already had underway, and they'll be a part of whatever we do going forward. So we're not leaving anything behind. We're taking what they learned early on, putting that into our task force report, which will include probably greater emphasis, both financially and from an asset viewpoint, into those projects, because those are areas that we've identified that are really the most in need. They were most in need before. They are the ones that are mostly impacted by the layoffs in the city of Chicago as well. So they're at the top And we're not taking our eye off the ball on that one.
In West Southwest is more important than ever before. And Samir Mayekar, who led that initiative, is also a key leader here of the task force.
I just want to share with everyone that we had a Burnham Council meeting yesterday that Andrew Broderick led. And there were two really interesting things that I think came out of it. One is, out of the 8 members that are on the Burnham Council leadership, there was literally the spectrum from people that have already returned to work to people that have no idea when their offices are opening. And the second point that I think is really a point of celebration is one of the members who live right down in off of State Street said that it was absolutely remarkable how quickly the city responded, and the stores that were boarded up after, the weekend before last, that the windows have been replaced. People were sitting outside eating and drinking. He said you would never have known that it was such a radical change in a matter of a week. So really kudos to the city and to the business community for really stepping up and really getting the city back on track so quickly.
Well, that's music to our ears, and we'll pass that on to the mayor because she was insistent on that, she works 24/7, and it looks like everybody else was as well. And that's an example of why the good news is that it's Chicago, and Chicago reacts. And they react both with their time, their money, their effort, and their minds. So, and I think that is the biggest single thing that will make people more comfortable to come back. The statistics in what you're hearing is the same we're seeing. About a third is people who want to come back right now as soon as they can. A third will like I take a little time, and a third like working out of the home. Obviously all those can't be accommodated, but I think that it's a good sign that there's a third that want to come back as soon as they can. And it's a good sign that the 2/3 want to come back, and the other third I think will decide. Probably their votes would change, or most of them would change, if in fact they were more comfortable doing it. So it's good news to hear. I hope that the message gets out that the city, the boards are down and the doors are open.
One of our board members is Dr. Suzet McKinney, who leads the Illinois Medical District. Suzet, given your background and the fact that Governor Pritzker had tapped you to be the Director of Operations for the alternative care sites, do you have any questions or any comments that you'd like to share today?
Sure, no comments. I actually wanted to ask a follow-up question to Andrew's question. So the Illinois Medical District is located on the west side of Chicago. And as you know, both the south and the west sides experience severe degrees of disproportionate effects for healthcare and other economic factors. So my question is, obviously the entire city is going to be involved in the recovery effort, but what do the two of you see as the greatest challenges for recovery, specifically for the south and west sides, considering that these areas of town were already in pretty bad shape prior to COVID-19 and the situations of the past week and a half?
Well, I'll take a crack at it, and then Michael will clean up after me. But it's a major issue. And as we said earlier, they're the ones that are most impacted by the layoffs and everything that's going on. And they're the ones that have had trouble navigating into the system. So we're trying to deal with those issues. Where is there money that we can help them navigate? The city of Chicago and others want to help them get all the resources that are necessary to deal with those issues. Number two, the issues of health and mental issues, and you know better than anybody, we're already there. They're multiplied now. And what I think will happen out of this is different things in the way we give and deliver medical care and mental health care will be, number one, we'll build on this telecommunication and telemedicine that's going on. I had a talk the other day with one of the major insurance carriers about the role that telemedicine can play going forward, because if we can get it into the community and the community can get there quicker and easier. Today, it takes you months to get a medical appointment. Then you have to get down there. Your kids are in school, or you have to get daycare. Then you have to come down and come back. You have long waiting periods of time. And we think technology and some of those will be necessary, but a lot of those can be delivered in the community. And so we're looking at where we put resources in the community to do that. A lot of them, I mean, I've got one idea. I want to take part of the library. I haven't told the mayor this yet. Take part of the library and make it a telemedicine center where people can come, get on the computer, and interface quickly. So that's just one of the ideas. The non-for-profits that do so much in this space have to survive, and we have to support them. They have to thrive. The demands for medical support, mental health support is going to grow, and we've got to get resources there, and we've got to use a platform to maximize those resources rather than the way we're doing it today. Because frankly, the way we deliver it today is very inefficient in some cases, especially for those communities. Michael, you have anything to add to that?
So my background is in marketing communication, and I love history. I think the one truth, and clearly you can hear this, I was not born in Chicago. The one truth, if you look at the reinventions and reimaginations of Chicago over the almost last 200 years, the truth was always that the leadership at that time only focused on the reimagination in the physical core and center at that time. It was the mid-19th century, after the race riot in 1919, it was after 1968. Any reinvention only focused on the physical center of the city at the time, which was further south before, now it's much more further north. I think the mayor is the first leader, the first mayor who does not think like that. And I think the one narrative that I try to combat every day, it's always downtown or south and southwest. They always pit it against, or either we invest in downtown and not in southwest, or we have to invest in southwest, but not in downtown. We have to change the narrative. It has to be an and. The last couple months have shown long-term, a thriving downtown does not have necessarily trickle-down effect geographically. We need to, the long-term, the reimagined Chicago has to have a booming, healthy downtown and a strong neighborhood in all neighborhoods of the area. Long-term, it will not survive if you only focus on downtown. I want to change the narrative. All 77 neighborhoods have to grow. And I think the mayor is the first one who really thinks inclusive. And the interesting thing is, I think COVID-19 has an opportunity for us because people will not want to move to the most dense area anymore long-term.
Right.
We have with Chicago, the urban character in all neighborhoods, but without the density of a Singapore, of a New York, or Hong Kong. And we have to make this an advantage. But I would, and as Sam mentioned, this is a very tough challenge, a question you asked, I think is the key question. But that's some of my thoughts I have on this topic.
Yeah, I'd add one other thing to that. We think there'll probably be a lot of manufacturing return to the U.S. As a result of our excessive dependence upon other countries for a lot of the supplies that we needed during this crisis. And I've had several people call and talk about, I've had one person that they're actually going forward with two building in the southwest side of Chicago, and a couple others want to do it. And so I think there's going to be a lot of entrepreneurial equity that's going to be invested into manufacturing and sourcing in the U.S. as a result of this. And a lot of them are looking to where they can build and where it makes sense. And those are going to be opportunities. And a lot of people, companies, all things being equal, will want to go into those areas, basically because they're closer to the workforce. Number two, there's a lot of people that really want to come to work, and they're very loyal workers, especially if you can do it in their community where it's easier for them to get to work. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities to us to go out and pitch Chicago to small and medium-sized businesses, as well as the large businesses, which already have somewhat expanded outside Chicago downtown.
Greg, maybe this is a great time for you to just quickly share the work that CCAC did last summer with a central city strategy for all of Chicago.
Yeah, and the themes that were just sounded are very much in harmony with that 70-page document. Our goal was to focus more broadly than the core. It was a bilateral arrangement, and we did a deep dive on understanding certain kinds of infrastructure that were necessary to knit the neighborhoods into the core and vice versa. So a couple of themes that you both have addressed were something that we held up in that report, and connectivity to the neighborhoods through infrastructure. Mr. Skinner, your experience as USDOT and how that funding could flow both currently and then in the future. I noted today that the 1.1 billion of the stimulus monies that the city gets, something like 54% is earmarked, 46% is open. I noted, I'm on the Auburn Gresham team, and Auburn Gresham got $4 million for their health center. And one of the ideas we're exploring is, can we make a marriage between that group and one of the major systems, Advocate or otherwise? So, you know, one of our goals is to get operational in these corridors and knit folks together that might not normally come together. Another key element in the Central City study that we did was digitalization and broadband in the neighborhoods. And it would seem to me that that's a huge part of whether it's telemedicine or other things. And are there ways to move that forward as a critical piece of infrastructure involving the mayor and the governor and more broadly federal funding? I think you're right in a couple of other respects. It's not going to be as dense going forward in terms of the real estate development strategies, and our neighborhoods can marry right into that. Similarly, the reshoring of our supply chain is critical. In that regard, one of the things that Kelly and others who've been active on the alliance side of our work would seem to me that 3 Midwestern states, 3 governors, 6 senators, and the congressional delegation could orchestrate around key pieces of infrastructure as we try to re-anchor and rebuild the economies, in part to bring stuff closer to home. Our manufacturing is huge, but a lot of our neighborhoods have hollowed out in that respect. And how do we, I think we have to pick some areas of significant focus and trying to make decisions about the things that are going to transform aspects of the regional economy. And so in your change analysis, what emerged as some of those early wins and why?
Michael, you want to take that?
Sure. I think the early wins is, if you look at bigger infrastructure, how can we advance some of the projects we had in the pipeline and accelerate them moving forward? Because that's what we have seen like in the 6, 7 as well. So there's a whole group focusing on that. I think that's a big one. I think the second big one is some of these industries, like the film we talked with some others, where opportunities. There will be, I talked yesterday with the CEO of Accenture, there will be completely new COVID-19 related jobs that didn't exist before. So how can we train and build a workforce that we estimate between 5,000 and 10,000 jobs in the Chicagoland area that did not exist 3 months ago? We have to train them. So there's some quick wins. And close to my heart as well, I think if we market Chicago as the safe place for people to visit, especially from the neighboring states, there's a huge opportunity for us. This is kind of my 3 quick answers. I don't know, Sam, if you have some other thoughts as well.
Well, I think you're right on. We do believe that there's going to be opportunities that we didn't even know about 3 months ago. But those are going to require skill sets, and we've got to educate to those skill sets. So a lot of what we're looking at is, where are we educating? Where can our institutions and others educate quickly people for these skill sets so they can apply for these jobs? And that is something that the city is going to be very involved in. I think Michael's absolutely right. I would, interesting observation, anecdotal, but I talked to an individual that has sites, has contracts with all the major convention centers in the world. And he went on to talk about Chicago and what a great convention place it was. And he hopes it'll get back. And we forgot that. It isn't Las Vegas. It isn't Orlando. It's Chicago. And Chicago offers, for people that come here, and hopefully they'll be start back soon when it's safe, they get a lot of opportunities and experience that you don't get in those other cities. And people want to come back to Chicago for that reason. So those are all good signs. I just saw that the convention canceled this year, but it was going to come back next year. So we've got to, we can't be negative. We got to be positive on all the opportunities that the city presents, and that we're working very hard to get to it. On the transportation issue, because you mentioned that, Greg, I think that there'll probably be a lot of investment in infrastructure going forward with these stimulus bills. The infrastructure, in addition to hard infrastructure, you know, the CTA and Metro and Pace have been hit very hard economically. And they got to recoup everything else like that. But also, we got to build out the infrastructure, the technology infrastructure. I mean, why in the world, I wouldn't think that in today's world with the expense, why you can't have worldwide bandwidth available to everybody in the city of Chicago on an economic basis, so that they don't have to pay, you know, or they pay minimal, and they've got the access to bandwidth to use this technology for training purposes, for communication purposes. And the rural areas, there's a big push for the rural areas, but there ought to be an equally big push for these areas that the carriers didn't build out in for one reason or another. And under the new mode, we ought to encourage them to build out, or find the economics to build out a robust internet and telecommunication system in those areas. It doesn't exist right now.
Steve Galler, any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you very much. I come at it from the residential development property management side. There is legitimate concern for the thousands of people statewide in the city who are really having trouble paying their rent. And there's been many proposed ordinances, statutes that would actually either defer payment of rent and delay evictions. All legitimate, all compelling. How do you balance the also legitimate interests of residential landlords who employ thousands of people and need to receive some rent payments to stay afloat?
Well, I might take it at 36,000 feet, and then Michael may have some more input from the city's viewpoint because he's there every day. Part of what we have is a strong residential and commercial infrastructure. We have projects underway, and we have projects that are well underway, so it's a major issue, and it really becomes it gets the ball cutters going down the hill. It starts going faster and faster, and you got to put a staff to it. I think that's on the radar screen. That really isn't the recovery task force as much as the city. So I'm going to hand it off to Michael, but we don't want development to stop. And we don't want these buildings are going to be differently structured. When I say structured internally, we'll be for a while anyway, be designing for distancing and some of the other things and for safety issues. But most of the buildings, by the way, kudos. Most of these buildings have already figured it out and have put it in place, whether it be a residential or a commercial space or manufacturing, wherever you go in the city already, whether they're returning to work or they're returning for occupancy, they're already got the testing and there's very few buildings you could go into without filling out a questionnaire, having your temperature taken. And I think that's and put a mask on. That's a demonstration that the buildings understand, the developers and the realtors understand how important that is. But Michael, you can, on the subsidies and the
I think it's a very good question. It is about balance. And you have also see how the political reality when Mayor Laura Lightfoot got elected 12 months ago, there were also a lot of new city council members. If you followed, I don't know if you followed the ordinances and discussion about rent relief very closely, she was very much on the balance. You saw some fraction of the city council very extreme, where you wouldn't be kind of obligated to pay rent for 3 or 6 months. So I think she tried to be, like I was to say, to be like the bridge between some of these extreme fractions on both sides, and really thinking from a mayor for all. perspective, and I think she has done a great job on that. But it's a balancing act every single day, and there's no rubber stamp city council anymore. So we have to, as well as a team, always be very smart about to find the right balance to bring the different parties together. You know, a couple of weeks ago we announced with the corporation as well with BMO Harris, PNC Bank, that the banks as well helping both the landlords and the tenants. So I think the mayor's job is really to bring these different fractions together and come with a reasonable solution that respects both interests.
And I might also, there's another component we didn't even talk about. A lot of these people have tax bills to pay. We already have, as you know, a number of properties that are in default because their tax payments. So that's an issue that the city may have a little, and the state and the county may have a little more say over, is on deferment of payment and things like that. But we're not interested. The city isn't interested in having another 50,000 homes or residences on the auction rolls because we didn't address that. But you know, and a lot of it, the buildings, a lot of them have been negotiating their leases, sometimes skinning the leases and NIC and putting it at the back end and things like that. So it sounds like the industry is doing some stuff as well.
Thank you. Don Resnick, I see you have your video challenges addressed. And
Yes.
so do you have a question or comment for our guests?
Yes, actually, I do. As a real estate lawyer, I've been working now over the last couple of months with the hospitality interests, the hotels. And one of the questions I guess that I have is that given the very significant importance of the hospitality and restaurant and entertainment industry to Chicago in terms of jobs and just the overall economy, and we understand that there aren't going to be any conventions for the rest of the year. That's just not going to happen, and maybe not even into the first quarter of next year, which means the hotels and entertainment industry are going to rely in large part upon transient guests, the tourists. What can we do in the short run, especially, because as these hotels start to open, they're opening, but they're opening with nobody there. Yeah. And so what can the city do to try to encourage the Midwest tourists to start driving back to Chicago for the holidays instead of, anecdotally, I know of a number of people that have gone down to South Carolina on vacation or up to Michigan, and we need them to be in Chicago.
Michael?
Yeah, I mean, we're working closely with Choose Chicago. We have a campaign ready to roll out that attracts exactly the neighboring states. It's just a question, we have it more or less produced already. The question, when should we launch it? Is it more an early phase 4, not right now? Because a lot of our hospitality places have not figured out, because I think it's a very, very important concern. Every research shows people will most likely not take a plane flight. They want to drive up to 4 hours. So we're targeting all the neighboring states. As you know, the mayor pushing hard for indoor dining up to 25% capacity. She has daily conversation with the governor about that, because we believe the city, we need to have indoor dining right now with the right precaution to get the restaurants back online. So we're doing a lot of things, but we're also very concerned. We don't want a spike in infractions again and then suddenly have to go move back. Because you look at the numbers the last couple of weeks in some of the states that open up too aggressively, you're having the numbers going up. So we want to be, which is painful, but some a little more on the cautious side, because we never want to go a step back. That is just not, that will be psychologically super, super hurtful for the city.
And we've also validated in our own experience that these testing, distancing, stay-at-home policies have worked. These do work. This is not somebody just putting in the air. They do work. They're very painful. They're emotionally and economically and physically, in some cases, they're very painful to go through, but they do work. So if you listening in on some of the mayor's meetings, she has got the right balance, I think. She, number one, knows the importance of getting people back to work. She is not someone that's going to say, I'm going to protect myself and the city at all costs. She understands how important it is, and she is driving for it. On the other hand, she's got her role as the senior public safety officer in the city, I've got to protect these people. So she's drawing balance every day, and she's very involved herself in how we go phase in to make sure it works. And her biggest concern and ours is if you get too soon, too quick, people given their own devices don't put the masks on and get together, and it's not a good formula. And it's hard to police that. You can't police that. It's really the facilities that are open. The managers and everybody else got to say, you got to wait. They can't let the barrier down. I mean, they are the first line of resistance, and they've got to do that. And most are, and they're torn too, because the economics of 50% versus 20% for a restaurant are pretty important, or a hotel or anything else. But I think most businesses understand it, and we've just got to enforce it. All of us got to enforce it as kind of leaders in the community, how important it is, and set the example.
Great, thank you. Andrew, did you have another question?
Yeah, I had another question thinking about the task force as it pertains to education, and specifically with higher education, four-year schools, community colleges, and even K-12 to some extent too. How are educators working on the task force, and what can we expect to see come out of your report in June that might help guide education in the future?
I'm going to take a crack at it, and then I'm going to ask Michael to get into the detail. This is an extraordinarily important issue. We're now validating what role online education can play and not play. And the results are mixed. In some cases, it's working well. In other cases, it's not working at all. We've got a fallout in the high schools in the city of Chicago that it's a high percent, not a high percentage, but you know, 1 out of 4 probably they may not have access to it. So it's not providing the same. I don't think anybody thinks that it will supplant the education system, which is in the classroom. But having said that, it's an economic way. There's a balance that you can do. You can deliver some of these things. It may be that, for example, this colleges, I'm familiar with this because I've talked to a couple of them, they don't have the space. So they're going to put in a mix of in-campus and non-campus, but they got to continue this connection with the student, whether it be at K through 12 or in college, and it's got to be training. And this connection can't be just, dialing in on a Zoom call. There's got to be some physical relationship, and in many cases, they don't have the facilities to do it. So, Michael, you might want to talk a little bit more about what we're thinking on. Yeah. And this, by the way, these are preliminary thoughts. We haven't finalized it yet.
I think the one thought that came up in regards to education, if you look at the CPS numbers, who have significantly improved the last couple of years, City College is doing a great job, but we don't have enough connectivity and connective tissues between all the different institutions. If you do a good job in CPS, there is normally, for a lot of the students, we look at the numbers, a fall off from what they're doing next. And I think so one of the key focus, how can we make much more connectivity across all the different cities, systems, because we have not done the best job on that in the past. We have with the Star College, we have started a few programs, but we need to do much more.
And by the way, another thing is our teachers weren't ready to deliver. And I'm not faulting them. And just all of a sudden we announced to them, you're teaching online. And they're learning it too. So we're trying to facilitate helping them learn how to deliver online education at the same time, not thinking that it'll replace everything. And colleges all over the country are struggling with the same issue. Then you've got to add to it, when is it safe to bring them back into the schools? And as you know, if you look at what's happening throughout the country, some have said, we're going to do online the first semester, like in California. Others have said, like Notre Dame, and I'm just picking one because it was the first one to do it, said, we're coming in back in August and ending up at the end of Thanksgiving. So there's two schools of thoughts in this, but behind that, you see that the schools are working with and wrestling with, how do we do that on a safe basis? For example, you can't have 2 in a room. You may not be able to have 2 in a room instead of, you might not have half as many in the classroom, or there may not be those classrooms. the dining. So these schools are all sorting it out. The city's goal is to try to do everything we can to educate the teachers if the environment is going to be like it is. At the same time, get them back to the classroom as soon as possible, using what facilities we have. It's not easy, as Michael points out, but it's absolutely, we lost a semester. These kids in school a lot of them lost the semester. Some of them got it, and I've got my boys are both online, and told the younger ones, and they're pretty dedicated and they get it done, but they say it's not the same. So I think a majority of them would like to be back in the classroom. And then of course you add to that, they're not getting the sports, they're not getting any of the other things that go with the in-school education. Plus, by the way, they're not eating. We're feeding in the city of Chicago so many people. And so there's all kind of reasons to get them back online if we can do it safely in schools. Is that fair, Michael?
Thank you. Go
Thank
ahead,
you.
Michael.
No, I think that was a great summary. Thank you, Sam.
So again, I want to make sure that the CCAC members that have dialed in, if you have a question, please send it through the Q&A button on your screen. And I see that we do have a couple of comments, and one that a member has asked that I read aloud. And the member writes, I'm involved in the ownership of several large office buildings in Chicago. I have spoken to many of our tenants and have consistently heard many concerns about returning to work due to public transportation, COVID safety, and cleanliness, both CTA and Metra. Yesterday, I rode a Metra to and from the office and was disappointed that my train car looked dirty. I believe this needs to be addressed in a complete commuter-based manner. Thoughts?
Well, I agree with him. If they're not doing it, they should. And by the way, a lot of these people have been around, and there's been no load. I mean, you look at Metra had 95% it had 5% capacity versus 95%. So I don't know what they were doing. If the cars aren't clean, they should be clean, and they should have those procedures in place. And we'll pass that on to the mayor. We probably ought to have make sure that they understand that both the CTA, Metra, and PACE understand the importance of cleanliness. It's interesting because you get in a car now, they got masks on, they're cleaning the cars all the time. We should be cleaning there's no excuse for that if that's what's going on.
Right, and we were fortunate to have the RTA chairman, Kirk Dillard, and executive director, Leanne Redden. So I know that this is, an issue that they are very aware of, and hopefully it was just a one-off yesterday, but it could be just that one time that somebody decides that they're not going to come back for however long, weeks or months. So we definitely need to be aware of that, and thank you for that feedback. Again,
well, I would also, if you get other feedback, you got a lot of sources out there, you ought to share it with us because we don't necessarily know it firsthand. I mean, if you've got people that are using the train and they're not satisfied, and it's not anecdotal, but it's consistent, we'd like to hear about it, because I know the mayor would like to hear about it, and she'll address it, I guarantee you. And get on Mr. Dillard. I used to have that job, so I can tell him. I'd say, Kurt, get on it. We're never under me. No, I'm joking.
Michael, another question is, you mentioned keeping your finger on the pulse of what other cities in other states are doing in COVID response. Can you share any best practices that you've learned?
Of course, I mean, honestly, we're looking more international because some of the countries are a little bit further ahead in the curve. Most of them, Chicago, we have done really well, and we got to our other US cities. I think Sam said as well, is about how do you build fast confidence? That's what we've seen in all the, especially European cities, some of the Asian cities. You need to build confidence, and then people are moving back to the prior behavior faster than you think. But some things just don't change. I talked with the CEO of Yum, and they have fast food places all over the world, and they say things that people just like and it's smart, they continue doing. But things they're like, why would I go grocery store shopping if I can do it online? It was a hassle before. So they keep the behavior. They just know it's easier. They keep, but things that they like doing, they go back to that. So they still go out. There's people still like to go out. But I think we can't underestimate signals of how you signify that you are safe. I went out for dinner on Friday evening and here in Lincoln Park in Chicago. And this restaurant was very smart. They had the menu at the check-in and they just told you, take a photo of the menu, sit down, and then you can order. It's the safest, smartest way, very simple solutions. But that signals to me, oh, the owner of this restaurant thought it through, made it safe. We cannot underestimate, that shows research in the other countries. We have to be super, super simple in signifying safety. There's a long discussion about temperature check at office buildings. Is it useful or not? Because people could have the COVID-19 virus and not having a temperature. But research has shown if you measure temperatures, even it would be fake, it would help because people who are sick would not go to work and be embarrassed that they have a high temperature. So it does help. Some things have shown over and over. So temperature checks objectively do help because people who are sick are more likely to stay home.
The other thing is, going to Michael's point, the other thing is it's all right to stay home. What I'm hearing from more and more employers is if you're sick, we'll accommodate you. If you've got an issue, we're not going to force you to work. We're not going to expose you, have you expose yourself and all our employees. We owe them more than that. So I think employers are understanding that for whatever reason, especially during this transition period, we got to be a little bit flexible in allowing employees. And most cases, what I'm hearing is if the employer really says I'm sick, they're sick, or number two, they just don't feel safe or comfortable, or number three, they don't have daycare for the day, they're letting them work out of the home. That won't go on indefinitely, but it's going to go on, I think, through the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. You know, if we look back 100 years to the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, the second and third wave was actually much worse than the first wave. What is the city doing and what is the task force thinking about in terms of what needs to be in place to address a potential second and third wave?
Michael, why don't you take that
Sure.
one?
I mean, I think where we in Chicago didn't get enough credit, if you look at how we managed this pandemic, we're better than any other big US cities. If you look at our hospital ICU beds, we were never under 60%. We had 60% was always available. So we had as well as a ventilator. So we managed this crisis better than probably any other big US cities. We're looking at the same thing right now. If we see now a spike in infections, how does it hit our hospital system? And if we think it's getting too aggressive and the numbers aren't doing well, we will, and the mayor will be very tough, as Sam and I see a lot of daily instances, we will move back and protect again more the population. So I feel honestly pretty confident based off what we have learned and how our hospital system is set up and how stringent we were, that the next wave will not be as traumatic that some people might fear. But we do have to continue to communicate. You should wear a mask, you should do the 6 foot distancing, and you should wash your hands. I think people feel like, no, we are gradually opening the city, all these things are not relevant anymore. They are now even more important than before. We'll launch a new campaign next week with the mayor, with like Be Safe Chicago, to remind all of us, this is even more important than before.
I think that I could just amplify, we're really on top of the statistics. The city is really on top of them. Director of Public Health doing an awesome job. She briefs every Saturday. We have a meeting with the mayor and all her team, and we talk about these very issues. And part of that is a briefing of what's going on, both from a research viewpoint, from a exposure viewpoint, from a contacting viewpoint and follow-up viewpoint. And that she gets right into it. So we're not going to be surprised. Whatever the trends are, we're going to see them.
Great. We have another audience question, and it reads, have any specific initiatives been proposed in the task force regarded COVID-related small business support? If so, could you talk a bit about how these potential initiatives align with or leverage private sector / philanthropic support for struggling small businesses?
Well, we're well aware that the people that have taken the biggest brunt and are the most exposed financially are a lot of the smaller businesses, and especially in the neighborhoods. And there's a lot of financial, the mayor, and early on when she announced a $100 million fund to deliver that, and we talked about that. We're also talked about the funding of the non-for-profits that deliver healthcare in the community, and there's funding of that. And there's frankly talk about right now, as a result of what happened in the last 10 days, raising some additional fund to help these businesses during this crucial time. All of that is forefront. We're going to lose some businesses. Michael, I think the average cash I saw in the report, these small businesses, a lot of them have had 18 days of cash. So they've now been 3 months. Now there's been some help for a lot of them, and a lot of the community stepped up, and now some of them are opening, but a lot of them aren't going to open. Some of them are older businesses that are family businesses that they just don't want to reload. And they're our community is known. Look at it. I mean, and there's going to be some, and it'll hurt the real estate business, and it'll hurt and it's just unfortunate. But those that can be saved, if it's financial or support, I think the mayor's dedicated to do whatever she can to make that happen. Hope that answered your question.
While we've been chatting, I just got a news alert that the mayor announced that they are canceling Lollapalooza and the Taste of Chicago. So, Michael, I'm sure that was something that you were aware of, and
yes,
now we're aware of.
We worked on this for a couple of weeks. I mean, no one should be surprised.
No.
We just thought as well, if you read the press release, we also substituting the in-person events with a lot of very innovative events, virtual event that are not as big, because we wanted to send the message as well. We're not just canceling things, we're still providing some great new options to be entertained and to enjoy the Chicago summer. But no one should be, I told my daughter 2 months ago, Lollapalooza is not going to happen. Just look at the data. I mean,
it was, frankly, I think everybody knew that. It was a little structuring and positioning as to who's going to call it. Was somebody going to call it versus are you going to leave? And there are probably some legal issues and contractual issues, but practically speaking, I don't think there's any sense to have major masses of people getting together in the time frame that's the same thing with the convention. Even if they hold it open, the machinist convention or the radiology convention, people wouldn't have come. So it's no surprises, and it's just most people. I don't think they've bought Lollapalooza tickets. Let's put it that way.
Well, we are usually the CCAC meetings. We kick off at 12 where people do their networking and grab a lunch. So we are scheduled to be adjourning in probably about 5 minutes or so. So let me just again ask our CCAC board if you have any other comments. And I see that as soon as I said that, it looks like another question has come in. We have one comment and a question. So the comment, we just want to emphasize that we work closely with the Chicago Loop Alliance and that they agree with the mayor. And we believe that downtown will be healthier if surrounded by healthy green neighborhoods filled with quality daycare, affordable housing, and access. We hope that that is our priority items for the task force. Michael, I think you can safely say that those are.
Yes. No, I think that I saw the comment. I think, yeah, I'm glad to read that comment.
Excellent.
And also daycare is we've learned the importance of daycare. We've taken it for granted, but a lot of these organizations, we've got to make sure they get back online because they haven't had business. They've been home, and if you look at the people that have been impacted the most, a lot of those are younger families that depend on daycare. And they can't go to work if they don't have daycare. And so it's an essential part of what we do.
Great. And then I see another member wanted to share that the 57th Street Art Fair in Hyde Park was held virtually after 70 plus years of big crowds on 57th and Kimbar. And also wanted to share that IKEA delivery yesterday, there were no signing for anything. The delivery person took a picture of the box on the stoop and that was it. So contactless delivery.
Oh, I don't think you can question that the delivery companies and the people that are doing it but the right way. They are, I'm very proud that these people have all adopted that, and as they go through and change their business model, that they aren't interfacing, they're not touching, and they're very aware of what the rules are and they're following them. At least those things that I've seen it. So technology played an important part of that. They need to validate the thing, but I wouldn't minimize the emphasis that's been placed on it by businesses and their adherence to it. And I think that's an encouraging sign. We can get our younger people, Andrew, is involved in distancing as some of the older ones would help. So I'll give you that as a mission.
Yes. Well, and in fact, I grew up in the southwest suburbs, and 2 doors down is now a doctor that I stay very close to, and he has a big position at the University of California, San Diego. And recently, 2 days ago or so, I received a text, and he said that the largest spike right now in California is between 20 and 30-year-olds. So, and then of course, we also know that in Arizona, they're almost at capacity with their ICU beds. And yesterday, when the news said, when you take the numbers globally, yesterday was the largest number of positive COVID cases, kind of, from a global standpoint. So we are far from out of the woods. And I agree with what Michael said. I mean, I think that the mayor and the governor really need to be applauded for early shutdown and staying strong and disciplined and really helping people understand what needs to be done to stay safe. And with challenge comes opportunity, and we're in a new decade, and there was already a lot of new technologies, autonomous vehicles. I think that they could kind of accelerate the opportunity to embrace change and put us on a path where there is more equity and where we are really kind of leading the nation with our adoption of innovation. So Greg Hummel, as our chairman.
The point I might make is, I didn't make it, I should have made it. As our result of our study, we've examined the participation in government contracts by MBEs and WB organizations, and it's very low. And we've got to really emphasize, and I think the mayor will be doing that, emphasize, especially those people, smaller businesses, allow them to get on trade to doing business. It shouldn't be all big corporations. And we've relied over the last several months on big corporations because they've been able to get the masses of masks and everything else. But as we turn to normalcy, the lack of investment, a minority investment in a lot of these contracts is really there. And the mayor's going to emphasize that, and the government can do something about that. But we got to give more than lip service to WB and MBE.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Skinner. Greg Hummel, as our chairman, any final thoughts?
Well, I want to thank you both. I am truly struck, my 45 plus years of law practice, with the leadership, both within the city, with the mayor. She is made for the role, and the governor. And so I think we have inspired leadership. They've galvanized efforts like both of yours. Our 60 odd members want to continue to be part of this. And the last comment that you made, Sam Skinner, is spot on. We're trying to create real investment opportunity for minority and women's business in these corridors. That's part of the formulation that we're going to help DPD with through our volunteer efforts. The people on the phone with me fellow executive board members, and it widens out from that. Fully 50% of our members were active in the 5 corridors that we looked at with World Business Chicago. This newer effort, Kelly, I'm sure additional firms have joined us. So we want to get involved in the streets in a specific way to help bring economic development to Chicago's neighborhoods. I think that's the signal change that the Central Area Committee has the last 2 or 3 or 4 years. So we're going to move forward on that, and hopefully good results will come from it.
Well, I just applaud also. I looked at the report that Kelly sent me. That's very excellent work. So you should all be very proud of that. It's obviously, it tracks a lot of what we found, but I think that when I read that, it could have been read like a product we might have put out. So maybe we'll steal it from you. Thank you very much.
Please do.
Thank you from my side too. Thank you for having me today. Really enjoyed this conversation today.
Well, and
Thank
to
you.
echo Greg's remarks, CCAC is proud to work with the city and hope that you call upon us with the task force. Let us know the role that we can play. We are an organization that has limitless talent and really a drive to do good. And so for our members, please know that on Thursday, the next webinar will be at 1:30. We have the Regional Administrator of the U.S. Department of Labor, Christine Quinn. So please make sure you register for that. We will be using GoToWebinars instead of Zoom based on federal government requirements. So be sure to register properly with the link that was provided in the email updates. CCAC monthly meeting will happen again via Zoom on July 14th. Watch your emails for updates on that program. And there is a goal, fingers crossed, to have a Burnham Council happy hour on Monday, July 13th in person downtown. So we'll be looking at finding an outdoor venue, and we will have strict registration in terms of the numbers that participate. But we do hope that that you'll join us on Monday, July 13th, and watch your emails for more information. So with that, again, a heartfelt thank you, Mr. Skinner and Michael. We really appreciate all that you're doing for the city, and especially you taking the time to talk with us today. So I wish everybody health and stay strong, and look forward to keeping in touch. Have a great day.